Hi everyone, this is Colleen with Designs of Value Art School. Today we're going to paint a wren sitting on a little stump here. Now one thing that I did change with this photograph, reference photograph, is the background. We're going to do a real soft blue as well as a golden. I didn't like the green. So we're going to change that. We're going to use some of the colors that are in the bird and in the stump that it's on. And I have a copy of the color map started, and you'll get a copy of this in your PDF download. So we'll get that started. And the background colors that I used were, for the blue, indigo and cobalt half and half. And then the yellow or the golden color that we're going to use is Sennelier Yellow Light, gold ochre, and burnt sienna. And the watercolors that I'm using are the Sennelier colors, so they have honey in them, makes them real smooth. I have a little jar of water here, and I added the blending and glazing medium to it, just a touch. Just makes your blending a lot easier because you can play with it longer. Now I did go ahead and I highlighted, or I should say I masked out the highlights on the bird because I wanted to save the whites. You can see here it's a little blue in color, and I like that. I like being able to see that. So I'm using the Peebo drawing gum for the masking fluid. And I did use just a nylon brush, and I dipped it in my pink soap first so that it wouldn't damage the bristles. I'm afraid it probably already did. I think this one was somewhat damaged to begin with, but that does help to protect the bristles of the brush that you're using, and then you can clean it out easier. So that's what I did there. So the background we're going to do is not necessarily right to the edge of the paper. We're going to see where we're at first. I do like to use my Sterling Edwards brush for the backgrounds. Blending and glazing brush, he calls it. And it just puts a lot more water on the background, and I want more water on there because I want this to be a soft background. I don't want it to be real dark and real heavy. But what I want is the gold to be in this area. And like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to go right to the edge of the paper, and then we'll have some blue over here in these areas. So let's go ahead and get that started. I'm going to do the gold first. And I did take my little jars and I made up some of the gold and the blue in advance, so I'm not continuously mixing and mixing and mixing here. So I'm going to take my blending and glazing medium for that background so that it doesn't dry real quickly. And I'm going to go right around the bird. And I'm going to go further in the background area than I want the paint to go because I want it to dry soft. We're going to pick up the blue right away and go ahead and do that right away. Now I'm not going to add anything but the water with that brush, so I'm going to take my number 8. I'm going to clean it just to be safe. Actually, what I think I might do, if I can find it, is take my 1.5 inch flat and use that to apply the gold. And like I said, I don't want to go necessarily right to the edge of the paper. Now this is going to lighten this because the paper is wet. This is one of the colors that's in the bird, so it's going to kind of match nicely. That's why I chose it. Okay, and I'm going to clean that brush. Holds a lot of water. And we're going to add some more. And we're going to start on one side or the other. We'll go on this side here first so you can see me. And we're going to go right around the bird's tail. And this will be our blue colors. There we go. Now I'm going to take the larger brush, pick up the blue color, soften this in right up to the bird. And if we need to go back and darken the background, we certainly can later on. Now I did go right to the edge there, and that's fine. Don't want to necessarily make that a hard line. I'm just going to soften it away. I do want to get into this area here, around that stump. Just going to give this spot a little bit more water to go into so it'll soften in. Same thing up here, I just don't want a harsh line. Just giving it more water. I'll do the same thing over here, just to soften that in too. Okay, now let's just keep going here. Pick up some more of that blue. Looks like we're going to end up using the blue more than anything else. But I didn't want a solid blue background. And we're going to go right up to the edge of that gold so it'll blend in, do its thing for us. Let the water do it. Same thing over here. I'm back. I've got everything dried off and cool to the touch. You can still see my masking fluid in there, so that worked out well. It didn't go away. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a wet on wet technique, and I'm going to start down here because I want to play with colors a little bit as we go and see what colors are going to work the best. I've got my number 8 brush, holds a lot of water, and I'm going to do a wet on wet technique right on this stump, I guess you would call it. I think that's what I've been calling it. I think that's what it is. We're going to go right around that foot, so we don't want to get that full of the yellow, which is what we're going to do first. Or the golden color we used for the background. That's going to be our first wash. And that's going to tie everything in. That was one of the reasons I did that with the background, so that you can tie your colors in. And that's, you want to think about that before you start to paint. Decide your colors and how are they going to tie in with everything else in the design. Have more than one wet on dry with the techniques, different techniques that you want to do to make sure you get all the streaking and all of that in there. Now I don't want this to dry real heavy down here, so I'm going to just pick a little bit of that up with my drier brush there. Okay, so now I'm going to go a tad darker, and to do that I'm going to start out with straight burnt sienna. So there's a lot of that color in here. I'm just going to drop some in. I need a little bit more water where I'm seeing it. And if it kind of jumps around a little bit, that's okay, because that's what this stump is basically looks like to me. There's some darker areas and some lighter areas, and that's what gives it its gnarly effect, I guess. It's a good way to put it. We're going to try to get as much values in here as we can. Now I'm going to clean my brush. I'm going to pick up some sepia. I'm going to add it right into that burnt sienna and just darken it. It's just kind of making it like a burnt umber, which is perfect. And we're going to kind of look to see, we'll get some in here, up on the edges. Every stump's going to be a little different, so if yours turns out a little different, no worries. That's the fun part about painting something like this. Everybody's design is going to turn out differently. Even though you might follow the same pattern. Okay, got some dark in there. Now I'm going to go straight sepia. Nothing else added to it. Add some water to it. And again, I'm using the blending and glazing medium because I want to be able to play with this a little bit. And right now it's just getting in those different color values. We've already got 3 values in here. You've got the golden, you've got the golden plus the sepia, and now we're adding in just the straight. And then you also had just the straight burnt sienna. So we're going to have 4 values in this stump. And that's great. The more values you can get in to your designs, especially something like this, the better off it's going to be. And then we'll go in and do some line work on that with the wet on dry, and which will help a lot too. Make this look more like a stump. Now, there's a couple light values in there, and I'm going to clean my brush, wipe it so that it's just damp. And I want some highlight over here, so I'm going to pull out that color there, and you see me wipe my brush off because you don't want to just reapply the paint you just picked up. You want to wipe that off. And then there are some highlights up in here. And then we could do a wet on dry yellow in there. But you want to pull this color out first or it won't hold. It won't look like the yellow. And I guess there's one like right in here. See how that just it works as a sponge? But if you don't wipe it off, you're just going to reapply the paint you just removed. So you want to be sure and wipe it off. And then you just want to keep going over it until it starts to set up or starts to dry. That's what I mean when I say set up. Because then it's going to stop seeping into where you're pulling it out from. Put our first glaze on the bird. And we're going to use the background for the darker areas. And then we'll use a straight yellow ochre, or not a yellow ochre, I'm sorry, Sennelier yellow light for the lighter areas. Just want to get a combination of colors in there. I don't want it to be real solid. Alright, so this is going to go, and I'm going to go right over the masking fluid. And again, I'm using the water with the blending and glazing medium. I'm going to come down on the legs here. But anyway, what I was getting at before is I'm pretty much a step-by-step painter. I paint the wet on wet. When I get my first pass of the wet on wet on there, and I don't care if this is botanicals or birds or what it may be, then I erase, and then I go ahead and do my wet on dry and do all of my different techniques to get the values that I'm looking for. We're just going to do the body on this first pass. Okay, looking good. Alright, so now we're going to pick up the dark value. And pretty much down in here, it's pretty dark, darker. Down in this area. Kind of up this area too. Definitely under here it's darker. Right under that leg there it is. That's good. And then we've got some darker areas right in here. Now I'm going to just pick up this. It's amazing, my table is at such a slight incline, but it still creates a puddle at times. Because I got a lot of water on there. So you want to be aware of that if you have the same setup as I do, where your table is tilting, then you want to watch out for puddles and pick them up as you see them. Okay, now we're going to add in just a straight Sennelier yellow light. It's because I want to get some other lighter values in here. Values creates form. Form makes it get its roundness or its fullness or the value that it needs. To create form. Otherwise you look flat. You don't want a flat bird. You don't necessarily want a flat stump either. Okay, so we got a little bit of value in there. And now while I've still got this moisture on here, I am going to add just a little bit of this darker color, not a lot. The bird doesn't have a whole ton of this until it gets up into the wings. But I'm going to do just a little bit in here. Some of it up here, down in here. Again, we're just creating form at this point. And that's just wet enough yet that it's going to soften in. Let's keep an eye on it, make sure it doesn't harden or dry in any hard lines. So now we're going to do the first pass on the top of the bird. Of course, it's going to be much darker compared to the belly of the bird that we just did. These will be the wings basically, so I'm going to do it section by section. We got the masking fluid on there, so we're going to go right around that, or over it, doesn't really matter. That's why we have it there. Now I did go over with the background right in here, but that's the same color we're going to use for the first layer, so we'll be all right there. So again, I'm putting in more water than what I think I'm going to use, or further on the area, because I'm not going to allow it to dry harsh or in a hard line. Alright, so now I'm going to pick up the first layer, and this is going to be the same color we used as the background. Now don't forget, I got everything masked off for the highlights that I wanted to save, so we're good there. I don't have to worry about that. I'm going to go around the beak there. Okay, I don't want to go out any further than that. So again, I don't want it to dry harsh. Now there is some highlight up in here, but I'm going to put the next set of colors on here, which is that color plus the sepia. Same colors throughout. And again, you'll get my color map. So you can follow right along with me with colors, which works out really nice. Right up in here is darker. Right over the top of that masking fluid is darker. I'm going to get some lines in there so it looks like bird wings. Okay, now, since I do want to go back and pull off some of that, cleaned my brush, I wiped it on my baby cloth, baby diaper, and I'm going to just pull up where I want that highlight to be. Wiping it off in between. There. Don't want it to be real stark white, that's why I didn't mask it. Now I think as long as it's still wet, I'm going to take just the straight sepia. I like this color better than burnt umber. I think it's got a little bit more depth to it. So that's why I'm using this. And I'm just going to reinforce. You don't want to cover up all the color you have down. I want to get some more values in there. Our key word there is values. And then when we put our wet on dry, we'll get some more detail in there, of course, which is a good thing. Okay, so let's go ahead and put the tail, first set of colors. I don't want to cover up the picture here. I want you to be able to see me and the picture at the same time. I think that's real important for you to see how I'm trying to accomplish these details. Okay, got the first layer on. Let's go into the darker color, and I'm going to add some more sepia again. Now this right in here is fairly dark, so we're going to start there with the additional darker value. I'm going to bring it all the way up here. And this does go all the way down. The tail feather like that. And then of course we'll do some more detail in there to get that so it looks like a bird. The beak, which is the gray part here, I've got the bottom part masked out, and then we'll go back in and do some details after we remove the masking. And then we're also going to do the legs and the foot, one foot. And I did add the colors that we're using right to your color map. The legs and the feet is going to be straight burnt sienna with a lot of water. They almost look pink on the picture, so it's kind of where we wanted to go. And then the beak is just going to be a watered down neutral gray. And I like the neutral gray because it actually has a tint of blue to it, and it kind of brings in that background. So you want to think of those things too as you go, what's going to tie in that background color. So now, since this is more of a detailed area, I'm picking up a number 2 watercolor brush, cleaning it, and I'm just going to pick up the neutral gray, bring my brush to a point, making sure I have no drips on my ferrule, which I don't. Now this is wet on dry, so in other words my brush is wet with paint. This is kind of streaky, so I'm just going to do it that way. My brush is wet with paint, but the paper is dry. So there we go. Now there, and I cleaned my brush out. I'm wiping it off. I'm going to use it as a sponge now. I'm just going to pick up a highlight that's right there, wipe out my brush, in between. My cloth is pretty wet, so I want to make sure I got it nice and dry there. And then there is a streak right down this top here, so I want to do that as well. And just pick up that color as we go. Okay, it's getting there. Now let's go ahead and do the feet. Like I said, they're almost pink on the picture. You'll see that. It's quite funny, actually. So I'm just going right into the burnt sienna all by itself with a lot of water. And I am going to turn this the other direction again, so I can get at it a little bit easier and pull the brush towards myself. Now, since I have two areas to do, and this is wet on dry again, I'm going to do the one furthest away from my hand, so that when I go in to do the second one, I'm not getting my hand in the first one. So if I would have started down here, and then I went up here, I'd be taking a chance that I was going to get wet, my hand in that wet, and I don't want to do that. So it's just basically filling it in, and I am going to remove just a little bit down the center for a highlight. There we go. Same thing over here. And of course we'll go back in and do some detail, get some darker values in here. Just trying to get the first layer on here. Because we're going to want to separate these toes and everything. I don't know if you call them toes or not, but and I'm going to use the neutral tint again. It's going to be a much darker value though, so a lot less water. But there again, it's got that blue cast to it, which I like. I'm just going to fill in this eye. Now as I look at the picture, it's pretty dark all the way over here. Now there's a ring around the outside that you do not want to fill in, because it's going to give us a highlight there, and that's what we want. And we might have to do this eye a couple different times. But there. So we've got our first pass of colors on every area. Okay, we're back, and I've got the picture over here just so you can see kind of where we're headed. And I am going to put a complete water glaze, just a soft one, all over the entire stump, just so we have some movement as we apply these colors. Now there's some highlights here, like right in here and up in there. You don't necessarily want to get wet. Some of this we're going to just extend because it's just not there in that photograph, so I'm making mine longer. But that's okay. That's what, you don't have to do everything exactly like the photograph. I'm doing this gently as I add the water. I don't want to remove what we've already got there. And it's fairly light over here, so we'll be adding some more yellows in that area. Alright, I think we got water where I need it. Add a little bit more down this way. Okay, good. Now, I think I'm going to go right to the number 8. Since this is a little bit of a larger area, I'm going to clean the brush just to make sure it's clean. We're going to start with the yellow. And I'm going to go right to the Sennelier yellow, which is a little bit deeper. And we got some yellow up in this area, so we'll add that in. We're just going to let the water help us blend it in. Got some yellow over in this area where I saved that highlight. Over in here. Some down in this area. And we'll put some all the way down here. And I think it wouldn't hurt if we had some of that over here too. Now we're going to go to the darker color. And while it's still wet, add in that darker color. And what I'm going to do is take sepia and add it in with the neutral tint, and that'll make it pretty dark. Sepia will keep it in the brown range, which is okay too. But this over here is pretty dark, so we're going to set that back by making it darker. And that's what we want to do over here. And then this comes down like this. And it's just creating depth in a fairly dark line, like right in here. So we'll add that in. And it gets darker over in this area again. This is just making it look somewhat like the photograph. It doesn't have to be identical. Up in this area is dark. Right over here is dark. Add a little bit more sepia. There we go. Now we got some real dark area in here. It's just basically having fun with our color, making it look like a stump. Don't want to lose all the colors we got in there. I think I am going to put a little bit more of the burnt sienna in there. Not a lot, but some. And this is just watered down. Probably a little less water than the last time we added it. Right in some of the same areas, just to kind of help deepen that. And again, you don't want to cover up all the other areas where the burnt sienna is, but so just kind of skip around. Now we can even come back in later and add in some more streaking and line work in there. Okay, so we're going to let that set up. Looks pretty good. Now this is completely dry, so we can remove any lines that might have been down here on the tracing. sure I don't have any in my cloth, so your brush can pick that up fairly easily. Okay, I think he's starting to look pretty good. Now I'm going to cover up the picture. There we go. So you can see the area that we're going to be working on. I'm going to bring this down just a tad like that. Alright. So now we're going to do a little bit more work on his breast. He's a little bit darker in here, and that's good. But we're going to start with a number 2, or actually a number 4. We're going to pick up some of that golden ochre. I think that's an absolutely perfect color all by itself. Yep. I think I might put some water in there first too. I don't think we need any blending and glazing medium because I don't want it to be real wet for a long time. I'm just going to do streaks for now because I don't want to lose all that yellow. So that's really a good color for him, is that yellow. Yeah, this is the perfect color for what we're doing. This is just giving an illusion of feathers here. That's what we want. Okay, now this is darker too, and it needs to have the same color added in to give it some depth. And we're going to start right up here and go around this highlight. So we're going to jump that highlight basically. And I'm softening it in with the water first. Or I should say I'm adding the water in first, and then we'll soften it into the water. And some of this can go in like this. Same color, just golden ochre and water. Now this I'm going to fill in pretty much the whole thing, as we've got to go back over it with darks yet. This is just another value that we're adding in. Helps create depth. We'll soften that in a little bit to that highlight. Creates a soft edge around that highlight then. Brings back some of that reddish color that he needed. We're also going to do a glaze of the burnt sienna at the end. Since I've got the smaller brush in my hand, I'm just wiping off my ferrule so I don't have any drips. And we're going to just fill in that eye a little bit more. There we go. Looks better already. Completely right around the outside. get that in first. And it's just going to be just a feathery little mark there, and a feathery little mark here. And there's a line underneath the beak. Now this is wet on dry, and it's fairly light. And some of this does come around like this, so we'll do it that way. Bring it up closer to that eye. We're going to do the eye one more time. Leaving the highlight, of course. There we go. Might have to make his eye a little bit bigger. On the painting, the photograph is bigger. Still want this to be a glazed effect. We don't want harsh lines here. Under here it's pretty light with this color, so we're going to put that right up. Right to the end of the feathers there. Okay, now let's go ahead and do a little burnt sienna on him, on his tail feathers once, just out of curiosity to see. He's pretty dark in this area. This is still wet enough, it should just blend right in. And it is, so that's good. Still have the illusion of feathers there with those dots. Some of this is going to come down in that area. And since we got that dark value underneath there, you want to be real gentle as you add your water, because you don't want to lose that darker area there. Kind of make it look like it's got feathers there. Transitioning to the feathers. Trying to let the water soak in a little bit. And again, you don't want to cover up all the color you've got in there. You want those values to show through. I'm going to, since it is a glaze, I'm going to put a water base down. We're going to put this right over the yellow highlights too, right over everything. And it's just going to kind of mush it all together and make it look unified. I'm going to test this first just to make sure on a scrap piece of paper that it's going to be the right value. Yeah, we could use a little more paint, and I'm glad I did that. That's better. A little bit darker. And then we just want to gently drop this in right over this entire stump. Make the brown tones. There, that looks perfect. So the color that we're doing here is burnt sienna, a lot of sepia, and the neutral gray. So that's our dark color for the accents. Clean my brush so it's clean for when I need it next time. Alright, clean this brush. You always want to bring your brush to a point, especially when you're going to be doing line work. You always want to remove the water from the ferrule, because if that runs down your brush and hits the paint that you're applying to the watercolor paper, it's going to create a puddle. And then you're going to wish that hadn't happened. Now we're doing wet on dry. It's going to be some dark in this area here, so we're going to put this in a little bit darker. Comes up like this. And at this point you want to really watch your photograph to make sure you're getting the detail where it needs to be. And as I'm putting that detail in on the feather tail, I'm rounding it so it gives it that rounded edge, and that's what we need for this. It is not a flat feather, it is a rounded feather in here. While we're thinking about it, reinforce that yellow, just because I think it needs it. So I'm just picking up the Sennelier yellow light. And reinforcing that yellow. Now let's work on this edge here where he's coming down. Now this light is just a little bit too light, so I'm going to put some arm marks that come down on the bird just like this. And it does help create some of those feather designs. Let's get this one in here nice and dark. That is probably the darkest one. It doesn't go right to the edge of the tail feather, but it does go all the way down like that. Add a little bit more color here. There we go. Okay, lines are little marks. This one's pretty blank, but we'll define that edge. comes all the way out. It's fairly thick. Just picking up some more of the same color. This is fairly dry. I'm not doing a lot of wet. It's just mostly dry. Just going to run those lines down. And then there are some lines coming down this way as well. So we're going to put those in too. Well, we still can, so you get the cross-hatched effect. And this runs right up underneath. This highlight is really rather thin on his wing there. In the front of his eye. And I'm going to make sure my brush is fairly dry as I do this, so I just wiped it off on the, and we're just going to flick so that we get some of those lines in there. Feathers, I should say. Then it jumps up to over here by the highlight. Paint. There we go. And a couple of these do actually go right over. So I want to make sure you can see me, and you can. The white there. But then the majority of them are up on top. And if you need to reinforce the dark below or just above the white, you can certainly do that below these marks that we're putting in. Now this is wet on dry. You don't want too much water here, because it's such small little marks. Now it almost starts to turn downward here. Keep forgetting these brushes don't hold as much water as the big ones. It's hard to remind yourself to go ahead and reload. And as long as we're in this area, I'm going to just bring some of these feathers down here. This is dark, so we're going to darken that. He's got some dark right in here. Not a ton, but enough that it comes down. And then there's some little marks over here. And a little bit up here. Now I am going to darken this again because I think we need to keep that separated. Let's do that. I'm going to use just straight Sennelier yellow. And these are actually little feather tails that are coming out. got a little bit of a depth here, and then they flick out. We got some dark in here, actually all the way across the bottom here too, to the edge of where his feathers are, and across the top. In front of this. Underneath here. And I'm going to clean my brush, and we're going to pick up that dark color we were using a minute ago with the sepia and the burnt sienna. And right in this dot on his nose is some dark, but it's not as dark as the neutral tint all by itself. So I'm going to just continue what we were doing here over that. I think I want to do one more glaze on the stump. I just want to get that darker. So let's do that. Let's dry. And I'm going to pick up my color again. All those nice yellows and browns are going to just shine right through. And again, you want to watch out for his little toe. And reinforce some of these darks a little bit more. Like this area here. And again, this is just a wet on wet. Just reinforcing the darks on there, which I like that better. Take just a little bit of our burnt sienna and incorporate that. Alright. So let's do some work on his little toes here. And softening that in a little bit better. And those tufts. Okay, I'm going to pick up our number 2 again. And I'm going to do just a wet on dry. Just to bring back his toes with the burnt sienna. Since he did have a little bit of pink in there, I'm going to add that back in too. There, that looks better. Now I do want to pick up that same dark value we were working with on the feathers. And I just want to outline his toes here so we can see them better. There. That looks better to me too. Okay. So one spot that somewhat sticks out, and I do want to get that covered. It's pretty light there, and it's lighter on the picture, but it's not as light as I had it. I'm just going to soften that light away. There we go. And I think I do want to run kind of a combination of the burnt sienna and the dark value and edge on the tail feather, just to kind of set it off. So you can kind of tell where the tail feathers are. Is there any more detail? I could add just a little bit of the darkened lines in here. Ah, that's my number 4. I wonder. I like the number 2 for the little detail like this. I'm just going to wipe off my ferrule so it doesn't drip. Just going to add in a little bit more feathery. Boy, if I could pick up enough paint, it'd be a miracle. Feel better. Okay, we're going to call this guy done. I like the way he turned out. I like his eye. I love his beak. And the little feathery things that we did today turned out really lovely as well. So we're going to call him done. We're good. I hope you enjoyed painting him with me. I know I enjoyed painting him. It was a lot of fun to do. That's the bird that I've been promising you. I'm glad I got him done for you. And keep an eye out. There will be an overview of him on YouTube, and then stroke by stroke, step by step, right on Patreon if you decide that you want to become a patron. And I want to thank you so much for supporting me in my channel. If you do like this, let me know so I can continue to do things like this. And if you'd like to see something special, let me know that as well. But I want to thank you again for your support of my channel. Have a lovely day.